we are going to present a few elements about the opportunities and challenges in accounting for polyexposures to chemical and biological agents in prevention. So in this way, we picked up some examples both in the food processing and in waste treatment industries in France. So as it has been said, it's a two-voice presentation. So I will start and then Philippe will take over. So concerning the backgrounds and aims of this presentation, many work situations are likely to expose workers to multiple nuisances, and these multiple nuisances are known as polyexposures or co-exposures or multi-exposures. And as you can see on this picture, there are different types of nuisances, biological or chemical compounds, but we can have a lot of other factors, for example, psychosocial factors, physical factors, or even organization of work. So how to assess and how to manage the risks? Then the aims of the presentations are first to provide feedback on working situations investigated in France, then to discuss how considering these polyexposures can be beneficial to prevention, and finally to highlight some of the scientific and technical challenges that this entails. So several working situations were investigated in France so that to highlight polyexposure. So first, waste composting and anaerobic digestion plants, as you can see on this picture. Then cheese ripening cellars. And finally, household waste sorting plants. So I will talk about the first one, and then Philippe will present the two others. So concerning measurement performance sites, for the three sectors of activity, we perform measurements for ambient and individual. So for biological compounds, culturable bacteria and fungi were sampled on closed-face cassettes containing sterile polycarbonate filters, and then the samples were analyzed at laboratory by counting. So these biological compounds were measured in the three sectors of activity. For chemical compounds, for example, ammonia, CO2, VOCs, they were measured in two sectors, cheese ripening cellars and composting and anaerobic digestion plants. And they were sampled in the same way as biological compounds with cassettes and suitable filters, and analysis at laboratory following the sampling. We used real-time monitoring too, when it was possible, in order to highlight a particularly emissive area or task. So concerning the first sector I mentioned, waste composting and anaerobic digestion plants, here are some results concerning ambient measurements. So it's an example here on the figure of ambient mesophilic bacteria. And you can see that following the process, high concentration levels of airborne bacteria were measured. If we consider now ammonia measurements, always ambient measurements, you can see that high concentration levels were measured, but after anaerobic digestion. So we can say that there is a potential polyexposure both with ammonia and microorganisms after anaerobic digestion. Individual exposure was assessed too. You can see on this figure that most values measured for ammonia were below the French OL value, but we had occasionally high exposure levels to ammonia for a few workers. And then here is an example of a follow-up of an operator, a production operator, and we can see that during his various activities, he is potentially exposed to both ammonia and VOCs. So it's another example of polyexposure, and here to chemical compounds. So we saw that there is an exposure to both airborne particulates and gases in this sector of activity, mainly due to emissivity of materials and ventilation management. Some prevention purposes can be proposed. A well-dimensioned ventilation system with regular maintenance and control is essential for the reduction of deleterious compound emissions. But if it is necessary, some device can be added, as for example containment or capture at source. As it has been said in several presentations, awareness of workers of their potential exposure is really important. To have a good management of emissive steps, to improve the process or to manage the stored quantities, etc. And it's important to reduce bad practices from the operators and to train staff. So I will let Philippe continue.
Thank you, Patricia, for your introduction and your presentation, and also for having saved many time for me. So the next issue is dealing with cheese production, especially with cheese ripening. You know that in France we are fond of cheese. We consume a lot of cheese, usually with bread, sometimes with wine. But anyway, we have more than 1,000 type of cheese in France. We are a large producer of cheese. And usually also this production sector is affected by different occupational diseases, such as musculoskeletal disorders due to heavy charge loads, as well as repeated jest, and also allergenic disease corresponding to exposure to allergens, and especially to fungi during tasks. We've carried out different measurement campaigns of both microorganisms and chemical agents in the air in one company, for example, here. And as you can see, we have a large the concentration of culturable fungi here. Here you have different tasks. You have a very heavy exposure of culturable fungi, which can reach 10 to 8 UFC per cubic meter, as compared to other tasks. I mean, just this is only turning cheese, this is packaging, this is outdoor reference. So a very heavy exposure to allergenic fungi. This has been identified in they all belong to penicillium. At the same time, workers may be exposed to carbon dioxide. As you can see here, the concentration is here are the different tasks. You can see that you can reach concentration up to the occupational limit value, which is in France 5,000 ppm. And this is not task dependent, but only area dependent, corresponding to the amount of cheese that is ripening in the cellar. So here we have only it's enough two type of exposure, microorganisms, carbon dioxide, and in other company we could have other gases such as ammonia or organic volatile organic compound. So we have found exposure to both particulate and gas in this company, which is quite prevention purpose, because it's quite difficult to manage both particle and gas in terms of technical means of prevention to implement in the company. We can act on the general ventilation. This can be locally for brushing cheese, brushing cheese here, but it's not efficient for carbon dioxide, which is spread all over the cellar. We could recommend a general ventilation in the cellar, but it is not a good idea, because carbon dioxide is needed for ripening. So we could move the exposing tags to other area, but this is not also a good idea, because workers are exposed to musculoskeletal disorders. So we have really quite a challenge to improve in this kind of company. So let's move now to the next example, which I will go very quickly through this because it's already been talked about that. We have carried out and show that we had personal exposure to bacteria and fungi and also to dust among different categories of workers. I mean sorting workers, cleaning operators and so on. The exposure can go up to 10 to 6, which is quite high, and we have found also allergenic fungi. Another question that is quite prospective at the moment, of course, no results. It's that in dust we can have also chemical compounds, especially micro and nano plastics, which brings polymers from the plastics and also additives, which may be harmful to the workers. This is the next, I think, next issue we could investigate at the INRS. And to respond to Peter, to one of your questions, tomorrow there will be, I think, a talk about microplastics. So there's something to do with waste sorting, I think. Well. At the conclusion, I can say that we found several evidence of poly-exposure among different workers in different sectors. And we have found very challenge regarding prevention means, because the question is how we can implement prevention means for this kind of complex exposure. We need more work about the measurement method and strategy, how we can investigate that to be so clear, how we can collect data and how we can interpret this kind of complex exposure. Yeah. So we also need, is there any interferences between the different exposure in terms of health effect? So this is not clearly investigated at the moment. And you can see we have a practical question about how we will manage that. So this is the future. So see you in 10 years. Thank you.